can go to the next one. Okay, well, you know what? The bottom line is I really do know everybody in the room. And I know where you're from. So let's get started with the first question. I'd like for you to share how you're feeling about the recent Black Lives Matter protests. And of course, I don't think I have to explain what that is to any of you who are on this webinar tonight. So let's have a conversation about that. Anybody? Or do you want to put it in the chat? Okay. Someone wrote the protest. Well, I guess you can see because of the diversity. Any other comments? Well, I will just simply say, as a child of the 60s who was in Newark at the time of the Newark riots and actually found my militant legs, I guess, during that particular time, it's been very encouraging. For so long, it seems that we've been waiting for a leader. And it's been great to see the young folks stepping up. I do pray for them continually that, you know, they continue to step up. Any other thoughts about the recent Black Lives Matter protests? If not, we can go on to the next slide. And you can unmute, what is racial justice? Well, here's a definition. I won't really read to you, but it encompasses a whole lot of things. And in this particular conversation, I just really want you all to keep this definition in mind. Racial equity goes beyond anti-racism. Now we need people to now we need people to go and actually do the work. So the next part of of what I hope is some type of a discussion is what racial inequities have you experienced or witnessed in your school or district? So let's take a few minutes. And I don't know, since it's such a small group, do you just want to unmute yourselves and talk? Do you want to type or what? So you let me know.
Can we see the slide before the definition?
Right. Yeah, let's talk about race, institution. What racial inequities have you experienced? I don't know whether you mean in the one before that, Yannick.
Yeah, the one before this one.
The definition.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Now it was a stop and jot. I kind of thought I thought that, you know, this crowd is fine, but I just thought there'd be a lot more people. So we can proceed either way. But what we really I want to talk about are any inequities or racial issues that you've seen in your school district. And I also want us to all be mindful that that doesn't necessarily mean that that doesn't apply to traditionally all Black district, because racism can still exist. So your thoughts on that? Well, we're going to be, is anybody writing? Okay. Well, the issue is, how were these inequities addressed by you and the school district? And I do have something that I'm going to have Evelyn send out to everyone. It's a form letter that is basically a way to address your district about racial inequities that you see or that you've heard of, and it's a letter that could be used by any local or group of people. So you can go to the next slide. I'd like for you, I think the next slide is the video. All right, let's start a short video.
The first thing that will likely catch your eye in this art exhibit are the colorful Ku Klux Klan robes. They're crafted by artist Paul Rucker, who saw a Klan rally in 1989 while growing up in South Carolina.
One of the reasons I have the Klan robe is to show the change in shape and form. You don't have to wear a Klan robe to have the ideology around white supremacy.
But Rucker's Rewind exhibit is more than KKK robes.
This show is less about race and more about power and who has the power and how they want to keep the power.
Rewind examines American history and shows how practices like lynching, slavery, and redlining have an impact on the present. Rucker has traveled across the country with the multimedia exhibit and has been to various small towns that might not normally see something like this.
I want to move without fear. And that's what my artwork does. I mean, my father was born in 1905. He lived during a time where he looked in the wrong direction. He could be lynched. I can't be a coward. I refuse to be a coward.
He's received a lot of different responses, but isn't too concerned with shocking anyone.
I can't make anything more shocking in the gallery that you're going to see when you go outside of the gallery.
The goal of Rewind is to get informed dialogue to happen, not just conversation seeds on feelings. The exhibit comes with a 30-page informational newspaper. Rucker is also in the gallery during showings to answer questions.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. What are your thoughts? Let's have a discussion about what our thoughts are about this video and this young man's approach.
Well, definitely gets a conversation started, that's for sure.
For sure, for sure.
Interesting.
I looked at it, I had the privilege of looking at it twice, and I thought how he took something totally negative and some of the and he used Afrocentric, kente cloth material, which I at first I was insulted by that. I felt like, why should he do something like this? And I really felt it passionately that he shouldn't have used such a negative connotation as a Ku Klux Klan robe and to predict or depict art. And I tell you, it was just I just couldn't believe that he would do something like that. But then I thought about how he himself, as an artist, used it to change the thoughts and minds in his own particular way,
Okay.
And so that's how I actually felt.
Anybody else have a thought or feeling about that? It's certainly a conversation starter. Go ahead.
Yeah, it made me think about people like Ben Carson, who are similar to us, and they carry their water because they constantly are on the wrong side of history.
Very interesting. So could you see Ben Carson in one of those robes?
Absolutely.
I can take cloth Ku Klux Klan robe. Well, sometimes though, taking the I saw it as an attempt to take the power away from the actual wearing of that robe. You cannot take the symbolism away. And one of the slides that came a little earlier talked about trying to deal with this issue. If we really want to resolve it, to deal with it with our logical brains more so than our feelings, because that robe emotes certain feelings, but feeling that way doesn't cause anyone to solve the problem. That's another way to look. And I don't want to offend anybody, but I know all of you here, it's like the N-word.
Right.
Although I hate that, but there is a part of a lot of people that if we use that word for ourselves, then it doesn't hurt as much as if you know, as if someone is using it against us. I just still think it's horrible, and I don't use it, but that is a rationale for some people. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, I couldn't have this without having done a lot of research regarding why we are where we are today. If you look at this, the genesis of the slave trade, the enslaved Africans, was the free labor, quite frankly, that did help build this country. But a lot of people don't understand that that still translates into the situation that is reflective today. One of the major handicaps is having wealth. And most wealth in this nation is transferred through property. You hand down your home, you hand down your land, because the land is never going to go away. But I wanted to, there are quite some statistics in here that even these statistics, I'm having a hard time saying that word. These statistics are new statistics. So these are not old statistics. Today, Blacks earn 8.7%, even doing with the same education and doing the same job. More likely, of course, to be underemployed or unemployed. We typically, Black people don't typically invest in the stock market or have 401ks. Therefore, this was a shocking one. Home ownership is 40% amongst Blacks and 73%. And a lot of that has to do with the not being able to secure a mortgage. And those of you who have a home, the statistic when I looked it up really shocked me that people of color are denied twice as much as others when they go to seek a mortgage and pay more. Next slide, please. So we start out with not having wealth. The highway system was very interesting because if you remember, my childhood home was torn down in the late 60s to help build Route 287. Now, 287 never ever came through the house that I grew up in Newark. You have to drive blocks and blocks to get to 287. But that was the reason why my parents were literally forced to sell their house. And when I saw some of my father's old papers, how much he got for that house was a shame, little or nothing. And another thing, because I learned in doing this process as well, that in the city, and I live in East Orange, and I know that Jackie does too. If you live in an urban setting, think about how far you have to drive from your home to get to the parkway or the turnpike. People, when I go visit people who live in, my sister lives in Piscataway, and people live further south Jersey, but in the suburbs, there's much more, less than a mile. You can be on a major highway to take you all through this state. And then when you look at the rate of car ownership, the suburbs were built under the HUD, under I believe it was the New Deal. I believe that was Roosevelt, but they were never for people of color. They were to have white people be able to escape the city, and then the highway system was built to have them come in because that's where the jobs were and go back out. Next slide, please. Okay, so when you look at a parental, and stop me anytime if anyone has a comment or you want to say anything. If you look at the average Black family today, they're working more, taking mass transit, which means they don't have quote unquote free time or family times. And 75% of those homes, every adult in the home is working. And it was shocking to find that 42% of the income goes towards childcare for pre-K. Next slide. Once again, we know that our districts are underfunded. And the shocking thing when I did this, even in poor white districts, the disparity is still the same. Even at the same socioeconomic level, there's still less funding for children and districts that are heavily of color. So when you really look at that, the whole system has sort of been designed to get us where we are, to keep us where we are today. Yes, go ahead.
Jacqui, do you think, how important with this data, how important for all of us as educators, how important are the census report in terms of really hashing out how we can continue, or we can get some of that money back in terms of resources for our communities?
That's a very good question, Evelyn, because our communities usually don't fill out the census, and that's a big negative, because I remember being a kid and and having and I lived with my grandmother and my mother and father and my grandmother and my grandfather. We all lived together, and I remember the fear of not wanting to fill out the census. And I don't know, did anybody else experience the what do I want to say, the distrust of filling out the census from maybe some of your older relatives?
Yes.
Yes. And today, that's even heightened even more with Hispanic people, Hispanic and African American people who are from places like Africa and are considered not to be what I hate the term illegal aliens, but they are considered not to be a part of this country, and that stops them from filling out the census. Although it says on the census that will have no impact, but you do have ICE around, and there are people who are afraid. I do agree with you that has an impact, but I would urge everyone to fill out the census, because that is where some of these decisions are made. Okay. Next slide. Suspension rate. So we all heard of the school to prison pipeline. And when you really look at what goes on in our schools, some of the infractions that a student who is not of color would get is usually a slap on the wrist. Boys will, and you always hear, well, the boys will be boys. They're just doing horseplay. That same behavior can very easily end, especially a Black male, in the prison, just in the juvenile justice system. So these are all things. When I looked at why we are, because I started out talking about how we feel about where we are today, and certainly with the deaths. But mind you, if we had not seen, if those deaths had not been recorded, what do you think would have happened? So let's talk about that for a minute. Do you think there would have been such an outcry?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so seeing is really believe, and the fact that they came like as soon as you got over one, then there was the next one, and there was the next one, and there was the next one. It was like, oh my God, what can we do? So young people, and thank God, both Black and white and brown and yellow, red, yellow, black, and white, like we used to sing in church. Everybody's joined together to try to battle this insidious issue that we have going on in our country. Now, I want to give you, let's go to the, anything else about the juvenile justice system? And
I think that statistic is startling. I mean, that is really disturbing. Black students, male students, 23% compared to 2% of white male students.
are doing the exact same thing.
And I think, you know, with Black male students, and looking at the massive incarceration rate being, you know, almost, well, nearing like 3 million African-American men in prison, I think those facts alone are very startling. And there is a significant correlation between your data and what's going and the massive incarceration rate and why that's happening. But that's a whole other conversation, I think.
Yeah, but yes, and thank you for that, Evelyn. And that's very true in the scheme of things. And you know, that brings this brings all research and all of this brings up such things that you see and you don't observe. If you notice, if you've ridden through quote unquote the hood, if you've ridden through Newark, I grew up in Newark, and until the newer buildings, riding through East Orange, riding through Irvington, unless they are brand new buildings that have been built within the last, I'd say, 10 years, those schools look like prisons. The older schools were built to look like prisons. There's usually no grounds around, and you can drive like really straight up South Orange Avenue and see grounds and where students can come out and have lunch and all of that. And that has something to do, it's almost like the juvenile system, because you know there's a lot of money that's been put into that, and if all those billions have been put into building jails, guess what? Somebody's going to have to end up there. So you have the suspension, you have the escalation into the juvenile justice system, you have students who go to schools that remind you of a prison in some sense. And so it almost falls right next to that we've already decided. Someone has already decided that this is going to be this person's life. Next slide. Once again, there was one before that, just a few things, more statistics, but I just thought all of these things, pollution, food insecurity, life expectancy. And when you look at the 1, 2, 3, the top 4, you would say the way to change those things would be at the ballot box. But then you have to look at the gerrymandering and voter suppression. And that's another thing we need to be cognizant of. I mean, this was a big story on the news yesterday about Kentucky and how there's something like, I don't know, thousands of people, they only had one place open, and someone had to call and say, leave it open until 6:30. So we have to look at all of these systems, and we all have to work together to deal with these issues. Next one. And then this is nearing the end of the presentation, because I do want to leave some time for discussion. When you look at what's really going on now, just being, how many on this line have been stopped by the police?
Oh yeah.
I have.
I have. As old as I am. And you know, you want to tell me why you were stopped, Jackie? What did they say you were doing?
The last time I was actually coming from a party, and the cop said that I rolled through a stop sign.
And did you?
Not that I remember, but you know, I was like, whatever, here's my stuff. Let me just get out of here alive.
Uh-huh.
It was late. Nobody was around. It wasn't like walking in the street or nothing like that. So I was just like, okay. And so he just let me off with a warning and just, okay, you're okay. I guess he checked me out and nothing was popping up in the system. So I was able to go. But yeah, it crossed my mind. I was like, okay, I don't know you. You don't know me. You just see the skin and
right.
It's gonna go down.
Were you outside of your normal neighborhood?
I was in Montclair.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Evelyn, where were you? Evelyn?
Oh, okay, so I was near, I think, it was someplace near the restaurant that closed down. It was some years ago, but he had one of those speed guns, and he said that I went over the speed limit like 10 miles an hour or something like that. I can tell you that I was really frightened. I felt like my heart was in my throat. And I could almost taste the bowel in my stomach.
I know, yes, absolutely.
Because I was afraid. I was afraid that whatever happened, no one would know because I was alone. So yeah, I was stopped for a ticket. So I know the feeling.
Yeah. Anybody else on the line?
We were in the park. The kids had a graduation party the other day, so we were in Branchbrook Park. They had the entrance closed coming to the left, and they had the exit closed coming to the right. The only way to get out was to make a U-turn. So my daughter made the U-turn. The police pulled up behind her. He ended up getting another call, so he didn't actually get a chance to talk long to us, but he was about to give her a ticket.
Wow. Wow. Well, I had a really horrible, I had two experiences. Well, actually three, but I'm only going to talk about two, because one really left me scarred for life. I remember being, I want to say maybe 5, 6 years old, which meant that my sister Joanne, we were 19 months apart. So she might have been going on, if I was 6, she might have been going on 5. And my father always had a nice car, Cadillac, you know, he worked hard for it. You know, he was a maintenance man. So, I mean, he didn't have but he worked hard and he liked his Cadillac. And on one of the things he loved to do is on Sunday after dinner, he would put us girls in the car with my mother in the back with us, and his mother, who, as I said earlier, she was still alive. His father had passed. He lived with us. And Big Ma would sit up in the front. And we would drive down what I now know is like Route 22 from Newark. And that was just like the biggest trip for us to go down, to drive like through the Scotch Plains areas and whatnot. And this guy, this police officer pulled my father over. He followed my father and pulled him over. When he said, "Get out the car, boy." And you would have thought he was in the heat of the night. I mean, because even though we were in New Jersey, he had on the glasses, the round hat, he was a trooper. "Get out the car, boy." And I had never heard, we revered my father. He was the man, you know, good man, good church going deacon. I mean, I'd never heard him disrespected like that. He said, "Get out the car, boy." And he looked and saw that it was just a car full of my mother and my grandmother and 2 little girls. And he said, "How you get this car, boy?" And my father said, "I paid for it. So don't talk back to me because I'll blow your brains out." And I'm beyond this part did end up being funny. But my grandmother started, y'all know, pleading the blood of Jesus. She was like, "Jesus! Jesus, 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 Jesus." She just went, she just got, "Jesus, don't kill my child, Jesus!" And he got so scared. He got so scared that he said, "Get on in the car and go and take it and go home," because he didn't know what this crazy black woman in the car was going to do. But you know, it really. My father was very embarrassed. And, you know, I saw something in his eyes that I never saw before. And that was that he couldn't be the man that he was for his girls, you know. And then I got stopped near the end of the school year coming from Nanina's in the Park. And
That's
I
it.
was,
That's the place.
huh?
That's the place.
Place.
I couldn't think of the name of it. That's the place.
That's right. Okay, I was coming from Nina's in the Park, something ECEA or something, and I was dressed, you know, and I was in there are 3 lanes. You could go make a right turn, go straight, or make a left turn. I was in the left turn lane. I made, when the light came on, which it did first, I made my left turn. And as soon as I made that left turn, here comes this cop pulling up behind me. I said, what is going on? Don't ask me questions. I asked the questions here. This was not too long ago. So I gave him my stuff. And I said, well, what did I do? He said, you didn't signal. And so I had to stop myself because the Jacqui in me was like, well, wanted to say, well, damn it, there was 3 lanes. Right turn, straight arrow, left turn. I was in the left turn. I could see if I made a left turn from the right lane or from the middle lane. And so then I said, don't shoot me. I started acting like my grandmother, but I didn't. He said, and then he got defensive. He said, why do you think I'm going to shoot you? I said, because I'm out here by myself. You're accusing me of something that I really don't think is anything to be accusing me of. And nobody's a witness here. And he took my stuff. Once again, Jacqui checked me out and let me go. So that was my story. But, you know, those are the things that we go through, and I do really consider it driving while black.
Driving while black.
I don't think I would have been stopped if I weren't black, if I was in the left turn lane and the left turn arrow came on. So anyway, next one. Go ahead, Jacqui. Were you saying something? Oh, go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the things is that I wanted to leave everybody with is a strategic framework, because I think it's important to know why we're here, but NEA's framework, of course, is awareness. And then I think we're all at the point where we need to start building capacity. Even though we're still on Zoom and not able to get with each other, we need to start building capacity and then put that capacity into action. So as we wind up, I would like for you to go to the next slide, Evelyn, please.
Now, Jacqui, with capacity building means just getting people on the meetings and
what I think right now, what capacity building could mean right now, since we're not able to get together, is something like your local, the EOEA. What are the plans, which leads into the slide that's up? Whether the actionable commitments are we willing to make to foster change? That is capacity building. Does an association, and this is for everybody who's on the line, does an association take it upon themselves to say, we're going to have a racial justice committee now? It doesn't necessarily have to be a paid committee if that's what, is the normal practice, but you may get people a racial/social justice, because Lord knows there are other issues that I had done work on for this presentation on LGBTQ, women's rights, bullying, but it was just too much for one time. So I decided to concentrate on this. But does a local end up having a racial social justice committee with people from every school to address issues? Do we reach out to organizations like the NAACP, or have a round table, I don't know, with maybe school leadership, superintendents, heads of departments, teachers, of course, our ESP members, to try to address some of the issues, because just because you may work in a school that's predominantly of color doesn't mean that there are no racial social justice issues to be dealt with. So yes, that's capacity building, getting buy-in from our partners, our educational partners, having more workshops like this when we can all get together. Okay.
Yeah.
So before, now, as we close, that's, and I'd like for, you know, people to chime in. And I think it's important to have to come up with actionable commitments that you're willing to make to foster the change that we need to see. And this is such a prime time now. I think they're all ladies on the line, although two people I can't see, but whoever's on the line, even getting out the vote is a commitment, because the more people that we can get to vote based on literature and recommendations that we get from NEA and NJEA, people who have already been screened to support public education, the better for public education. So we can do that. And I'd like for, if you could, for you all to maybe jot down these questions, so that when you do go back to your local, or if you meet on Zoom, it might be a place to start. And then I always like to have a time frame. So I like to try to figure out where if I'm doing a new project, where do I want to be in 6 months? What is easily accomplished? Maybe it may take you 6 months to actually get that forum together and have a couple of meetings to decide what your agenda is. And being in the classroom or being ESP, one of the things that we all know we're missing is a righteous portrayal of the contributions of all people in our history books. But see, I was a music teacher, and remember when back in the day when they said everybody has to teach reading? Well, I had to teach reading. If I were in the classroom, I'd be trying to find music, Hispanic music, Afrocentric music, all kinds of music, to feed into that thing. It can become a whole school culture type thing. Evelyn, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that these are excellent questions, and I just want to go back to this screen here, because I think we should be aware of some of the things that are happening around. We should build capacity in this way, and I love that word action, because with action comes to mind, because remember the NEA-RA will be on
I think it's Zoom or WebEx.
Or WebEx. But we should keep in mind some of these questions. Some of these questions should take shape in terms of new business items. I want to go back even further into this, because these statistics can drive a lot of the idea of how we get some of these things started. It's almost in terms of a roadmap, and there was a screen before then that kind of outlined some of the issues involved that you had outlined in terms of
like food insecurity and
food insecurity. We're talking about the birth and early childhood. And all those things are, so all of these things are the guiding ideas in terms of how you get started in terms of building capacity for what we need to happen, and how do we take actions on voter suppressions and things of that nature. But one thing I think the action is to join with each other, to link arms with each other to make it more powerful.
Right, and I have a suggestion for those as we get toward the end, and back on that question. Also, if you can't, I think of all the things, number 3 has to be front of mind as you even approach number 1 and number 2.
Absolutely.
Because if you can't measure, I'm on several chats with educators, and there was this one a white teacher who said that she had one black boy in her class and that she loved him. I mean, he was just the model kid, but he was the lonely only. And what could she do? Feel more comfortable? What could she do to make him feel a part? And what could she do to impact upon some of the treatment he was getting from some of the other children? And my suggestion to her was, you can do some reading, even though we can't necessarily meet in person now. You can read some books. You can verse yourself on his history, so that one day if he's feeling down, just in your lesson, no big deal. Did you know that an African American man invented the cell phone? A lot of people don't know that.
Right.
And Alexander Graham Bell, well, the real word is that he was the one that actually designed the phone. But there was no way he would be given credit for that back during that time. So so those are little things that we can do. And how would she measure that? That eventually, if she did that from time to time, he'd probably walk in there looking a different way. He'd have something to brag about as well. So I think I would hope you would take note of these things, of how to measure your progress. And then I have some resources, I do believe, on the next page that I did want to get to. Yeah.
Did I pass? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The Amistad, and I want to just go back. I know we started a little late, so just give me about 5 more minutes. The Amistad, yes, I just want to make sure that we understand what happened, because it was about this time last year that it was on my heart. I couldn't sit still, and I am still on the executive committee. I was last year, and I'm still on until August the 31st. And I made 2 motions at that time that I think are going to transform the NJEA. And one of them was, just as we support the Holocaust journey every year, where educators, doesn't matter what color you are or what your religion is, that educators go to Auschwitz, Germany, so they can actually see and then appreciate what happened there, and to that group of people, that we do the same for the Amistad, where educators, ESP, and JA members actually go to Ghana, Africa, to see the history and the beginning of the slave trade, because it's not an easy trip to take. It's a heart-rending trip to take, but it gives you so much, it lets you so much know why we are where we are and how we got here and what it had to take to survive some of that. And so that was, so NJA does spend $75,000 to do that. And the other thing, when Evelyn was saying about new business items, in 2015, I brought forth the new business item that said NEA shall address the issue of institutional racism and the impact it has upon educating children of color. And that remains a cornerstone of the NEA today. And so those, you want to try to get something that will last. And how do I know it's there? Because when I look in the budget, I can see where the money's being spent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you want to go to the NEA. If you go on NEA@justice.org, racial